G'day, guys. Welcome back to the Life Outside podcast. Today, I am very excited to chat with some good friends of mine from my recent through hike on the Pacific Crest Trail, Garron and Dedra. You might know them from their Instagram, Route to Happiness. We met about a month into the trek and crossed paths pretty consistently throughout the trail. Dedra was through hiking while Garron followed along in their house on wheels with their three pups, working remotely and supporting Dedra on her trek. Thanks you guys so much for coming on. Great to see your beautiful faces again. How you doing?
Great. We're doing awesome.
Wonderful. Life's great.
Unreal. Yeah, you guys had a fairly unique experience on the Pacific Crest Trail with both of you guys technically kind of following the route, but one of you hiking, one of you driving. And I think that's, fairly uncommon, but a pretty cool way to do it. Yeah. How was that experience for you guys?
Yeah, honestly, for me, it was kind of nice to have him close by. It gave me a peace of mind knowing that he was around in case anything were to go wrong. And
Yeah.
starting solo and being female, it just like allowed me to feel a little bit safer. And obviously, like technicality, it was a little bit easier in some aspects, changing out gear and things like that if I needed to. And then like getting some rides into towns and things like that, and him helping me carry some food and with resupplies. And it also benefited my tramley as well in that regard. They were able to like throw some gear in the van and we were able to help them out that way. And same thing, if we needed to like resupply in a really random area, Garron would come and bring us our food and gear or whatever we needed. So honestly, it was really nice way to do that along the trail and have that experience.
It was like a personal trail angel type experience for them, I think.
Yeah. I've talked a lot about trail angels on the PCT, which is, people that kind of go out of their way to help hikers. And I guess you had sort of almost a permanent trail angel, which is really cool.
There was one period where he wasn't around for like 3 weeks because he had to go back to Canada for a friend's wedding that I was supposed to go to, but then I just ended up not doing it for like time wise to be able to finish the trail. And it was definitely quite noticeable when he was gone.
Yeah.
I was just feeling like a little bit maybe more anxious about certain things, like, getting hitches with random people and things like that when he wasn't around. And then there was like the wildfires that were happening when he wasn't around. So there was like a lot of chaos, it seemed like, when he wasn't there. But it honestly was a really good like growing and learning experience for me to have like that 3 weeks just completely doing it alone as well.
Yeah. I think a lot of couples, it seems to me that like one of them is really into this kind of thing, like a through hike, and then the other one maybe not so much. There were definitely quite a few couples, I think, on the PCT, but I think more often than not, one half of the duo would be left behind and one would be on the trail. That was my circumstance. My wife, she's not a huge outdoorsy chick and definitely not a through hiker. And so being separated is quite hard, and you've got to have quite a bit of, I guess, trust and support in a relationship like that. But Garron, you were like, I'm just going to follow you along the whole trek, which is really cool. And I don't think many people have the capacity to do that. But I guess you work remotely, right? So you both work remotely out of your van. And as far as I know, you guys have been living out of your van for quite some time, at least part-time, and doing a lot of traveling. So I guess where did that start? When did you guys move into the van? How exactly are you able to work remotely to make this possible?
Yeah, we moved into the van in the October 13th of 2022 was the exact day we like took off and finally were, I call it glorified homeless, and had nowhere to live anymore other than our car. And so we started off on that trek, and we did that until she took off on the PCT. The PCT was actually never in our plans when we first hit the road. And then it was kind of an idea that started festering in her mind kind of a year into it. And then 6 months down the road, next thing you know, she was launching onto the trail and I was taken along for that ride. And it's funny too, because van life was Dedra's idea from the get-go. I was just the supportive partner there as well. And we're blessed. We both work online. Like I do websites, marketing and things like that. So I have the benefit of being remote. And in our relationship, Dedra's always the dreamer and I'm the doer. So she comes up with a crazy idea and then I figure out how to actually make it happen. And so we were a year and a half pretty much into our van life experience. And she was like, I think I want to hike the PCT. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm following you. And next thing you know, I was driving beside her, and it worked good for me because, like you said, not every partner's into through hiking. And I've done hiking. I've done many, or I've done multiple like overnight, 7-day treks. But I think 7 days for me is the limit. I get so hungry and I lose so much weight so fast, and I become so unpleasurable to hike with at that point that I think it was a better thing that I didn't have to do the through hike.
Yeah, totally. So you've done a few, obviously, trips on trail beforehand. Both of you had. I think you guys had hiked a bit on Vancouver Island and some other stuff like that. Dedra, the Pacific Crest Trail is a long trail, obviously. What was the longest hike you had done prior to that, and what made you want to do the PCT? It's a crazy, crazy thing to attempt, and I think everyone has sort of their own inspirations coming into it. What was it for you?
Yeah, so the longest hike I had done prior to the PCT was the North Coast Trail on the island here. It was about 7 days long, so 6 overnight, 7 days total. And also similar, we did the West Coast Trail as well. So we had done like two kind of multi-day backpacking trips. That was my only experience prior. And obviously, like I did it with a group, so I never had any like solo hiking or camping experience under my belt. But the PCT specifically, and why I wanted to do that was because I had it in my mind for actually many years. Before I even had met Garron, was just kind of getting into hiking and camping through college, and came across some YouTubes of the Pacific Crest Trail, and kind of, watched a few of those, and then got it in my mind that that was something I wanted to do one day. And obviously, life happens and you kind of go through different experiences and things like that. And ultimately, it led to me being able to actually do it like 9 years later from when I actually found the PCT. So for me specifically, it was a lifelong dream of mine. And because we were traveling in the van, I thought it made kind of the most sense to do it that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you consider joining her, Garron, on the through hike itself, or was that always like a no thanks from the start?
I mean, I would have loved to. I think I just am realistic that for me, it would have been an impossible thing to do. I think that's why, like, you tend to see some older people who are a little more set, attempting something like this. And like, financially, I just knew I couldn't give up my job being self-employed. I didn't really have those roots, and I wasn't willing, I guess would be the word, to shut down my whole business for this adventure. And the funny part is when she first pitched it to me, I even shut down her doing it because I was like, it's not possible for either of us. Like, think of this logically and all that. And she had given up the idea. And then we started talking about it. And I think I just came to the realization that it seemed like an impossible task to make happen for both of us at the same time. So for me, I just had to make the decision of, it was a bigger dream for her than me. So I was going to try to play the support role and let at least one of us do it, since it seemed like her drive was there for it and mine wasn't that strong, rather than letting my lack of drive hold her back too. So it festered in my mind. I think we talk about it. I think I could have done it. I think I would like to do it, but it's not something that I'm getting called back to. I can't see myself reversing roles now and doing it without her. For example, I just kind of follow her around and support and get to do cool things along the way.
That would be kind of funny if DJ jumped in the driver's seat and you guys switch roles to do the whole thing over again. Yeah, you mentioned, I guess, like older folk generally have a bit more freedom to do something like the Pacific Crest Trail. I think that's so true. Like, it's either someone that's really young and hasn't really built their career yet, and so can quite easily say goodbye to whatever they're doing and spend 6 months hiking a trail, or it's an older person who maybe has retired or is at sort of the end of their career, and they can quite happily go off onto trail. I think, yeah, there's some people that just give up everything to hike the trail, but it's very hard when you have something that you're building and that you're doing and you can't really take too much time away from. But it's pretty cool that you are working online. I think that's a lot of people's dreams, to be able to work on the road. You've got like a Starlink set up on your van and you just literally work out of your van. And Deidre, weren't you working as well, like sort of as you were hiking, because you had your home office on wheels and you could kind of keep that going at least partly?
Yeah. So when we fully decided that we were going to allow me to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, I had a role as a marketing manager for a dog chew company in Colorado. So basically what I did in order to keep my job and be able to like hike the whole entire trail was I like automated as much as I could with this position, whether that was like blog posts or email automation or social automations. And I did about like 80% of automating my business and job. And then Garron actually took on like 20% of like the manual labor work for me through the week, responding back to like customer email requests and maybe some ambassador social people who needed some questions answered. So I covered like majority of my job, and then Garron actually did handle, you know, a little bit through the week. And then when I came off the trail, I would then do those things for myself, and as well as I was creating content for another brand, Zenbivy, who was paying me as well to go and do the hike. And that was one thing that we decided that we wanted to pitch, was try to get someone on board for me to also make some extra money on top of my marketing job, so that, you know, I was saving instead of racking up a lot of debt in the meantime.
Yeah, and to kind of layer onto that, I think looping back to the older people doing it, I think it's because financially they're in a position usually to do it, and we weren't really in a financial position. Like, had she just given up her job, which is part of why we initially ruled out the whole idea. But then we started thinking like, okay, there's probably a creative way to do this, and it's not going to be easy. And that's where we came up with the idea of automating things and having me juggle it, and then her working on days she was in town. And then also we're like, to supplement that, we started pitching the brands. And I think there's so much opportunity now with online in general, as all of us here know, that I think it opens the door to trails like this to more people. You just have to be willing to get creative, and maybe it doesn't look the same for you as it does other people. Like, I think you and Dedra probably had a lot more work to do on the trail as much as you were hiking. And some people will say, well, that takes away from the hiking. But just watching you two, I don't know if it did. Part of me thinks it like added to it. And like a lot of the people who did finish were the people doing that. So kind of adds another layer of commitment, I think, and actually helps you do the trail better.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's not many people that hike the PCT that can say they were able to keep their job during that whole trek and actually like still make money. And so I'm in the very blessed position to be able to do social media as a job and hiking as a job. And you know, DJ, you obviously are doing quite a lot of that as well on Instagram. You were posting pretty regularly on the trail. In fact, I think I was watching your videos before I even met you. And where did we meet? I think we met at, was it Tehachapi where we first met?
Yeah, it
The
was
Walmart.
at the Walmart in Tehachapi.
The
we
Walmart. I think that,
it was kind of funny
yeah,
because
that's
I
right.
actually, yeah, I knew you prior. I followed you from when you were doing the Terra Roa. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but your
Good
hike
enough.
in New Zealand. And then obviously I saw that you posted that you were doing the PCT. So I was like, oh, cool. Like maybe I'll run into this dude. That'd be pretty awesome. And then I ended up running into you in Tehachapi at the Walmart, and I like looked at Garrett and I was like, oh, I think that's like Cambo stock from Instagram. Yeah, then I just ended up saying hi, and then that was the first time we connected. And then it was kind of like the next spot was Kennedy Meadows. Prior to going into the Sierras, we said hi kind of briefly, and then after that, I think it was closer to like Oregon. There, we spent a
Cascade Locks was, or sorry, Crater Lake.
Crater
Right
Lake,
before Crater
yeah,
Lake was the first time we spent
Yes.
a real like hang out. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You guys had a campsite at Mazama Village, I think, and invited us over, which was really cool. I think we loved seeing you guys because you're awesome people, but also because you had Starlink on your van, and we just were like, hell yeah, we can actually connect to the internet. But it was
Yeah.
funny, yeah.
That was
When we
my,
first met, at that Walmart, that was the first Walmart I'd ever been to. So I was like just having the best time exploring this iconic American supermarket in Tehachapi, and yeah, I recognized you down one of the aisles. And yeah, it's funny on a through hike, you just kind of run into the same people over a 5 month period on a trail. And yeah, it wasn't until probably the last month or two that we ended up crossing paths a lot more often and got to know you guys a bit better, which was really cool. You know, our trail families kind of
Mm-hmm.
intertwined on a lot of sections of trail, and it was It was really cool. Yeah. So Dedra, you've been creating content for a while. I don't know if I know where that started for you and how that's been for you, and how'd you find creating content on the PCT? Because not many people know unless you do it that it's not easy to sort of keep up with regular content while hiking 12 hours a day as well. It's a bit of a task, but I think you have to enjoy it. So
Yeah.
how was that for you?
Yeah, so it mostly like it started more frequently when we decided to do van life. We bought our van and we kind of wanted to like start documenting that journey. So I was just kind of figuring out like, ways to put the videos together, and you download CapCut and found some, video editing softwares I enjoyed, and started playing around with that a little bit more. And then I think Instagram Reels became like a little bit more popular in the last like year or two. So started, utilizing those a little bit more. But really, it started like only, I would say, like 3 years ago. I became kind of like a little bit more interested in the content creation game. And then when the PCT happened, it was something, in the back of my mind that I was like, you know what, this could be just fun to document in general, and just have this as a journey and place to be able to look back on when I'm, 60, and be like, oh my God, look at that, like what I did. So I viewed it as kind of like a little journal, virtual journal. But also, I thought it could be cool to keep sharing this journey and trying to inspire other people online, especially women, to get out and, pursue things that are really scary and fearful. And that was sort of my motivation behind continuing to do it along the PCT. I will say there was times where it became, difficult, and maybe I wanted to put my phone down and be a little bit more present in the moment, or when you're having a moment of sadness, having to pull out and talk to your phone, it doesn't always, feel great in the moment, but it's important to share the authenticity and realities of the trail. So no, I really enjoyed honestly creating it, and it was really cool to get so many messages from people saying they were inspired, and they followed on my journey, and there's so many people offering me like things, free things, resupplies, and like it's crazy kind of the virtual community that I created along the journey as well. So yeah, that's where it all started.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super awesome. I think part of the reason a lot of people connected with your content and were so willing to be a part of the journey was your authenticity, sharing the ups and downs. A lot of people on social media just share the ups, as I hope most people know. It's generally just a highlight reel. And so, you know, I think it's refreshing to see people who do share the crappy parts of whatever they're doing. And through hiking, in my opinion, is the best thing in the world. I love it so much, but there's no hiding the fact that some days suck. Some days are miserable. Some days you're wet and cold and tired, and you just don't want to climb that hill, and you just want to be done, and all that kind of stuff. And sharing the realities of a trail like the PCT, I think is super important, especially for people that are looking to do it themselves. Yeah, Garron mentioned like earlier
Mm.
that creating content can sort of take away from a hike, maybe, or maybe add to a hike. I think for me, creating content while on trail added so much. I think, just like you said, to be able to look back on the adventures I had and have like a sort of a daily log of everything that I did, and I can just kind of, it just teleports me back to those moments. And I've been creating content for quite a few years now, so I have hikes from 3-4 years ago that I did, and I can just instantly watch my videos and just relive it. And to me, that is the most incredible gift that I can give myself. And I encourage everyone to do the same, even if they're not posting stuff online, to actually just record stuff and capture some of those moments. But also, like you said, Dedra, to be able to inspire other people to get outside is a super fulfilling thing. I think being
Yeah.
outside, specifically hiking, where you're pushing yourself and you're in nature and you're often surrounded by other people who are doing the same thing as you're struggling together. It's just so powerful for both physical and mental health. So yeah, I'm interested to know,
Mhm.
like, do you think that creating content overall added a lot to your hike, or do you think it maybe took away in some areas? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think both for sure. Yeah, I think it like, you know, with adding the element of being able to look back and see the journey, is I really appreciate that, and the inspiration and inspiring others to do. I think holding on to that was really nice, and having like the account. What I think was great about the creation in general is just holding myself accountable to get to the end, because I didn't want to,
Yeah.
have people disappointed in me. So I
Yeah, I get
honestly
that.
think in general it was great in that regard, because who knows, maybe I wouldn't have finished if I wasn't posting all over social media that I was hiking the PCT. I think in some regards it was, like I was mentioning, was kind of difficult, especially in the working regards. I feel like it was hard when I was taking, 0 days and having to see my tramley go and, hang out and play games and go do things that looked really fun. And I had to sit in my van and do some work and things like that. So sometimes it would get challenging in those regards. But overall, I think it added a lot for me. And I'm really happy that I decided to do it all the way through.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I'm lucky. I'm such an introverted person that like I couldn't wait to get into my tent and hide away and do some editing sometimes. It's like this is my I got a lot. I got a lot of alone time walking, obviously, but it was kind of nice to not feel obliged necessarily to like participate in all the social activities around camp. And I was like, I'm just gonna go into my tent and do some voiceovers and talk to myself for a while. So that was almost a positive for me. But I think both of you guys are pretty extroverted, so missing out on some of that stuff would have been hard at times.
The creating content thing that's really interesting is we were chatting with Dan, the guest you had on here last, and we were talking about the experience of sharing like the post trail life, and how it's so hard for anyone who didn't do the trail to actually understand what you went through. So I'm sure you face this too, where you get the same 5 questions and then people just don't know what to ask anymore. And it's like, all right, well, back to
Yeah.
regular life questions, and it feels disconnected. So you'd think like for me, as someone following you guys the whole way, that I would feel extra connected. But even her recording allowed me to see way more into what each section was like. Because realistically, I would see her once a week, maybe twice, and get a bit of a verbal dump. And I would see the area and kind of get a sense of it, but I still didn't know the in between. So having that content for me, even following, was so beneficial, because we would sit down and she would be like, well, look at what this happened and look at what that happened. And, had she not recorded that, even me as her partner there wouldn't have really been able to connect with her the same way. I would only have been able to connect with her the same way the average person did, with a slightly heightened degree. So I feel like content's really cool, because, for both you, your families, your friends, and everyone, or anyone who's interested, can actually try to understand what you're talking about. Because to the average person who didn't watch your content, or had someone who did it who didn't record it, it's near impossible to actually understand what you went through. And even the video, I don't think really does it justice most of the time.
Yeah, I think yeah, my wife, my family, super grateful that I create content, because they can actually come along on these adventures with me, whereas they wouldn't necessarily want to do it in person. But to your point, it's like of not understanding like what it was like. It is very hard to answer questions and to sort of explain the experience that you have on a trek like the PCT with people who just haven't experienced it, which is why I think it's cool to actually catch up with people who have and like reminisce together, because it's impossible to understand. It's impossible to understand what it was like. It's such a profound,
So true.
incredible, challenging, crazy thing that we did. And yeah, I'm kind of like it. I kind of like being the only one in my family or in my friend group that knows what it's like. It's kind of like it's my thing, and I have that forever, and it's really cool. Um, I'm interested to know
Yeah.
what your guys' favorite parts of the PCT were. It'll be interesting to hear yours too, Garron, because you obviously didn't see every step of the trail, probably nowhere near it, but you were still able to
Yeah.
see some pretty cool places. And I think a lot of places that most people wouldn't even drive to, you did drive to, because you had to kind of go meet Dedra at some random trailhead or like some random dirt road or whatever it was. And I think you had plenty of your own adventures along the trek as well. You were doing some fly fishing and a bit of hiking and that kind of stuff. So, what was your sort of top couple
Yeah.
of sections of the PCTs, or favorite like specific locations for both of you?
I'll go first, because mine will be probably a bit of a shorter list. But it was really interesting. The desert, I will start by saying, was not my favorite. Living in a vehicle somewhere that's 45 Celsius above is near impossible when I didn't have air conditioning with dogs. So I'll get that out of the way. It wasn't the desert.
Sure.
But I think for me, Oregon and Washington are hard to beat. I think like both of you are going to have several places there you love. But like Dedra and I have talked a lot about this. We had two totally different experiences, we realized, because Oregon was one of her least favorites just with everything. It was one of my favorites, having the ability to go east and west and north and south and see the perimeter around the PCT, not the trail itself. Like being into fly fishing and hiking, mini hiking. There was just so much like rivers and landscapes. Like, so Oregon for me was, and Washington, hard to beat. All of it, every step of the way, or every mile of the way on the road.
Yeah. For me, if I had to rate the sections, it would be the Sierras, obviously, number one. It was just incredible to be there. And specifically, I spent a lot of time alone in the Sierra, so a lot of solitude through there. And I did a lot of like reflecting on life and, going through like past traumas and things like that, and really trying to work on like my sort of mindset and frame around my anxiety and things like that. So I worked a lot on myself mentally through there, and as well as I spent quite a bit of time alone. So it was really cool to like have that solitude through the Sierra. So that was like a special one for me. And then second would be Washington. After Oregon really rejuvenated my spirit, and like I felt like it was just so wild. I saw, a lot of wildlife like elks and elk bugles, and like it just felt really wild and remote, and kind of brought out that like wild spirit in me that like I've always had like my whole entire life. So Washington was definitely my favorite. Going through Goat Rocks obviously was incredible. Even though I nearly died on that snow traverse through the Goat Rocks, that was pretty scary. I mean, I forget, like it was like the section where I forget, it was through Goat Rocks, but it was like the section after you were standing in the one spot and you're able to see like all three mountains in one spot. It was like coming down that one trail, and I didn't realize you could go up and over and avoid the snow traverse, but I went through the snow traverse, and basically it was, if you slip, you were going down, and I just went really slow, and I just felt like I was gonna like fall the whole entire time, because obviously we're wearing like not the best traction shoes at times, and felt a little unstable and things like that. But nonetheless, I made it through. Actually, the Sierras was the worst experience for me. I actually fell and had to do a self-arrest through the Sierras. So that was a little nerve-wracking. But obviously I'm still here, which is great. And then the desert was like my third favorite. Honestly, I love the desert. It was just a whole new landscape for me that I'd never got to experience in my life. And I was telling Garron, like, one of my favorite things through the desert was like the bird sounds were crazy. Like every morning it was like the birds were singing to us, and I was like, that experience was cool. Even seeing the rattlesnakes and all the different like bugs and plant life and things like that, it was really cool to see. And also had a pretty almost negative experience there. I almost got bit by a rattlesnake, so
wow.
That was a fun time as well. And then
PCT.
Last was Oregon, I think. Yeah. And then last for me was Oregon. I don't know why I didn't love it as much. I think I was just it was just kind of like flat, like there were some moments where there was a lot of burn areas, and I just felt like it wasn't like my favorite section. There was definitely some beautiful moments, and it was cool to experience the lava rocks and see the waterfalls at the end. But like other than that, Oregon, I had, I kind of struggled through there for the most part, but that's sort of my whole experience and breakdown of each different section.
Thinking of like specific spots, I think Timberline Lodge, if you do like a 50-mile stretch north and south of that area was probably like the single most favorite. It's kind of like that perfect mountainous terrain, but it's nothing crazy. Tons of river, lots of water. Yeah, that was hard to beat. And then the lodge itself was just so cool. Mm-hmm. So I did love that area specifically.
Yeah, Timberline was epic. And I did the 24-hour challenge through that section, which I think I did a lot of it obviously at night. Half of it was at night. So I think I missed some of it, but it was an incredible part of Oregon. And like the waterfalls north of Timberline and the mountains south, and then Mount Hood itself, where Timberline is, so epic. It's interesting, Deidre, that
Mm-hmm.
your favorite sections were had some of the most sketchiest experiences. I think yeah, those experiences are fairly memorable, and it's like type two fun. Where in hindsight, you can look back and say, I'm glad I went through that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there was a few moments like that for me, like mainly in the Sierra Nevada, where like you're just on these high passes, you're at altitude, and it's just like snowy traverses, and yeah, one slip can be the end, which is pretty crazy. I think yeah, I think a lot of people were nervous going over some of those high passes, especially people that like don't have any experience in snow and stuff. And we had a very good snow year
Mm-hmm.
this year. We had a very good
Yep.
conditions. I can't imagine doing it in some of those bad snow years where like it's not just the passes that are snowed over, but it's like almost the entire Sierra Nevada. Just like a
Yeah.
wildly different experience. But I mean, I agree with you
Yeah,
with
for
that.
sure.
With almost all that ordering, Sierra Nevada was just the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. Incredible, so much beautiful wilderness, and the desert. The desert's underrated, man. The desert was awesome. There's snowy
Yeah.
peaks, and then there's like mountains everywhere, and it's hot and it's dry, but it's really special. I think NorCal was probably my least favorite, but even that was awesome. The PCT is just beautiful from start to finish. It's crazy. It's just so crazy. It's unreal.
I'd like to throw a question to you guys as someone who followed you both, I guess unknowingly in the first half with you, but her along the trail. One of the funniest parts or most interesting was you would go off and then I would meet you 4 or 5 days later and all of a sudden just hear the stories of near death or heat exhaustion or how terrible it was or how great it was, like this dump. And then, at least for Deidre, I would hear the filtered side that she gave her parents and everyone behind the screen to not make them worry. Did you have any close, like scary experiences you kept tight to the chest until the end? And if so, where'd they happen?
Yeah, I don't think I had any actual near death experiences per se, but there were definitely a few moments that I was quite nervous. And most of them involved like wildlife, rattlesnakes and bears specifically. Coming to the US from Australia, I am not used to bears. You guys are Canadian, right? So you're used to grizzlies and moose and God knows what else. Crazy
Yeah.
big animals that will just destroy you. We don't have that. We don't have that in Australia at all. So coming to the US, my wife, my mum specifically, very nervous about bears, and I didn't want to tell them too much about mountain lions because they would have probably not let me come. And so the few times that I did see bears, I think I saw about 5 bears in total. Sometimes very close up as well. I had to probably give a bit of a different story back home that I was a mile away from the bear. I saw it in the distance. It didn't even know I was there when in reality it was like 10 meters away from me and definitely looked me
Yeah.
directly in the eyes. But luckily the black bears are pretty chill. They're nothing to worry about, which I think I eventually got through to my family. Like the bears aren't probably going to kill me. The mountain lions probably see me, but they haven't jumped me yet, so I'm all good. And yeah, it was interesting. And the rattlesnakes, I don't know. We have snakes down in Australia which can kill you, but the rattlesnakes are just scary because they're so loud and intimidating. And it's like, geez, you walk past one and they freak you out. That's for sure. But I think, yeah, I think we had a pretty good year. Like the snowpack wasn't so bad that it was super dangerous for most of the trek, and also like all the river crossings. Like I heard a lot about river crossings before starting the PCT that are potentially deadly, and people have died in them before. But most of the ones I went through were really relaxed, and I have done a lot of like hectic river
Mhm.
crossings on other hikes before. But I didn't have too many issues on the PCT. Did you have many crazy river crossings, Deidre?
No, I didn't have too many bad experiences with the river crossings. Like there was that one, I forget what area it was in or what it was called, but like there was a
Okay. Well,
detour to go around. It was called like over the top
Yeah,
detour.
yeah.
I ended up doing that detour and avoiding the river crossing, but I don't know if you went through that one. I can't remember the exact
I did go
river
through that.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, it was kind of funny because they told us not to go through the river for obvious reasons, safety reasons. But we went to do this detour, and the detour was almost more sketchy. I feel like we were like just scaling randomly across
Yeah.
mountains.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I was a bit ahead of my trail family at that point, and I think I was like maybe half a day ahead. So I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to do the detour. I might just wait for them to catch up, and we'll do the detour together. But I got to sort of the fork where you could either turn left, go do the river crossing, or go right and go up and around. And there was a ranger there waiting, and I was like talking to the ranger, and he basically said just like, you didn't hear this from me, but the river crossing is pretty doable. I went across this morning. You shouldn't have any issues, kind of thing. And I had heard that the detour was crazy and like, yeah, like super bush bashy and climby and like walking along ledges. So I'm like, screw it, I'm just gonna go do the river crossing.
Yeah.
Luckily, yeah, there was another couple hikers that did it with me, and it was probably the hardest river crossing of the PCT, but I didn't really feel unsafe at all. And I got across, and then the rest of my trail family
Okay.
caught up, I think, the next day, and were like telling me how crazy that detour was. And I was like, well, I guess I probably made the right decision there. And I think the PCT association ended up like banning that detour at one point, like after I went
Yeah.
through. Like they put out a post saying like it's too dangerous and it's off trail, so we don't want to like affect the environment. And then people started having to do like the most insane detour around like a huge section of trail just to dodge this river, which ended up being pretty chill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it
crazy.
was funny because you guys had a pretty unique experience, I think, on the trail, and there was quite a few detours with the fires this year and other obstructions that it was fun listening to all of you try to plan in town what the plan was, because it's just this mythical far out notes, and one note will say totally fine, and then the next one will be like you're risking your life, and then you have to make a call after never seeing the section. That was always pretty interesting to watch, the
Yeah,
decision making
it's
process.
the far out comments are a bit of an enigma because you have no idea who's commenting and what their risk level is and all that kind of stuff. And there's definitely a lot of fear mongering on a trail like the PCT where like someone who's not very risk averse will say that, you know, you 100% shouldn't go through this section. Whereas someone else who
Yeah.
is maybe a little more, you know, okay with taking on some risk will be like, yeah, it's completely fine. I don't know what anyone's talking about. So you kind of have to like dig through all the noise and really try and figure out what actually is happening, which is impossible sometimes. But yeah, you're right. This year there was a lot of fires, which you know, was an interesting one in itself to sort of navigate because trails would be opening and closing, and you'd have to do detours, and then the next day you wouldn't have to do detours, and no one wants to skip trail. You know, that's always pretty disappointing to have to skip a section, but that was kind of unavoidable this year. How did you feel, Dedra, having to get around trail? I guess you had Garron to help you sort of navigate that, which was really huge. I think some people really struggle with actually being able to get rides around certain sections and that kind of stuff. So that would have been a help.
Yeah. So my first experience with the wildfires was the park fire, like the big one that happened just at like the halfway point. And he wasn't here. He was in Canada going back to the wedding. So I actually had to navigate that myself with my other family member, Madeline. It was just her and I at that time. We had gone from like 7 members down to just the two of us because some people had gone home or took some time off the trail. And Mal and I basically had to figure out what we were going to do. And unfortunately, when it broke loose and went crazy, we were in that area, so we had to skip up, unfortunately, and skip some miles. And I think everyone had to this year, but when we got up further and there were some other sections that were closed from fires, we either did some road walking or some of the small skips would be Garron helping us out in the van. So I only really had to do like one or two sort of, hitches from wildfires, and then other than that, I had Garron to kind of bring me around and go up and get past some of these points that were, had shitty air quality or there was a fire burning close by. So that
how
was,
how was it for you trying to with the hitching situation, and that contrasting what we were doing?
Yeah,
Because for
we
her, she would just send a message and I arrive.
Yeah. We got really lucky in that we dodged the park fire, which was really the massive fire this year in the PCT. I think it was one of the biggest fires in Californian history, if I remember correctly. So we dodged that, which was good.
Mhm.
And so the closures that we had to go around weren't terribly long, but it was always a challenge getting hitches. Back to what you said, Deidre, earlier about creating content and people reaching out wanting to help. I was very lucky that a lot of people like reached out to offer rides and stuff. So like a few of the bigger skips we had to do, like the one from Crater Lake in Oregon, I think there was about an 80-mile skip
Mhm.
there. Like someone had reached out the week before, was like, if you need anything in this section of trail, which was the section that was closed, I'll happy to come out and help you. So I was like, oh, we actually need to skip a section and wouldn't mind coming out to pick us up. And she did. And that was just awesome. So we didn't have too much issue. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed hitchhiking actually. Like you just meet the most weird and wonderful people. And if someone's willing to
Yeah.
stop and
I was
pick
gonna
you
say.
up, and especially when you're so disgusting, like they're obviously an incredible person, and I loved it.
Yeah. Thank you to
Yeah.
all the trail angels.
I was gonna say the
Absolutely.
like the generosity that you receive from people out on the trail is just insane. It makes you like, it changed my perspective on the world of, there's bad people out there. Like in reality, there's actually so many good people who are willing to take their time to bring you food and give you rides and have you come stay at their house and things like that. So it really helped me change my perspective on the world for sure. So that was a cool experience I got from that.
That was one of the highlights for me on the PCT was the people and the generosity, because I think a lot of the media, at least in Australia, makes America look like not always the most friendly place. Everyone's waving around their guns and all this kind of stuff. It's just what you see on TV, and it's definitely not reality. I had the most incredible experience with American people. The trail was epic, but the people were just more epic. Like you said, people offering their homes to random strangers that stink and are disgusting, and they let you sleep in their bed. And we had one family who let us borrow their car and like, yeah, just take the car, go around town, do what you need to do, and just come back and drop it off and stay the night. And like just like stuff like that, it just blew my mind. And not to mention people that go out of their way to drive out to trail, cook up a big barbecue and feed you hot dogs and stuff like that. I didn't have really any negative experiences with the people in the US. It was just overwhelmingly positive, and I'll look back very fondly on that. Not to mention like everyone on the trail, all the hikers, just super cool people for the most part.
There was times where I heard about you guys getting trail magic out in the middle of nowhere, and as someone who was driving and coordinating, I could not fathom how they got to you at certain points. And you would tell me they had
Yeah.
tents and barbecues, and I'm like, it seemed like impossible. They must have helicoptered in.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people that had hiked the PCT in previous years would often come out to give Trail Magic because they knew how much of a support that would be, and so they probably knew like all these back roads because they had walked through them before, and they'd come in and give you stuff. What was your like favorite Trail Magic, Deidre, that you got?
Oh yeah, it was in the desert section.
You should say me.
Well, actually, Garen was great trail magic, as you know, Cam.
It was
and
amazing.
no, but yeah, it was in the desert section. I literally am blanking on all these like names, but the desert section, there was this one gentleman who had like a whole setup of burgers, hot
Oh,
dogs, chips, pop, and it was like kind of through a really hot moment through the desert. And these like, you're there and you're like hiking for 3-4 days and you're like, oh, I'm getting like hungry and hiker hunger is kicking in. And I feel like this man who set this up came at like the most perfect time because I was having some issues with like feeling like less energetic and things like that and a little more burnt out. And yeah, he had like burgers and hot dogs and all this stuff, and it just like rejuvenated my spirit and was one of my favorite trail angels and trail magic experiences.
Yeah, it's always the best when you're feeling absolutely terrible and you walk around a corner and there's like a cooler full of soft drink, or there's like a person there cooking up hot dogs. It's just like an angel has come down from heaven. One of my favorite trail angel experiences were this family that we met. It was in Washington, I think, yeah, we were doing the detour around the Mount Adams fire, and this family were just camping out in the forest. Like, they weren't actually trail angels. They didn't even know PCT hikers existed. But we walked past their campsite, looking pretty deceived, probably, and sweaty and tired. And they just called us over. They were this Colombian family, and they just called us over. They asked what we were doing, and then they just invited us to their cook up, and they were cooking up like some traditional Colombian food, and they had their kids there and their dogs, and they had made up like this punch stuff, and they just invited us into their family. Basically, they had a campfire going, and that was probably the most memorable one for me, just because like they weren't even there to support hikers. They didn't even know what we were doing, but they were just so willing to go out of their way to invite us in and join the fun. And yeah, it was really cool, really, really cool. But there were so many people that just came out and fed you, and it always happened at the right time.
Yeah, I had one day where I got 3 trail magics in one day.
That's a good day. That's a very,
It was
very
crazy.
good day. What was your
Very
favorite
good
thing?
day.
What did you crave when you're on trail? Because I think a lot of people crave like soda, like a cold soda, especially on a hot day, or like, fruit or something like that. What was it? What was it for you?
For me, it was definitely Diet Coke. I was like, I don't know. It was like I'd be in like 2 days into the hike, and then that's when I would start craving Diet Cokes, like, and burgers and fries. Like every time I went into town and got town food, it would be burgers and fries and Diet Coke. That was like my meal essentially the whole entire way through the PCT. So I'd say those 3 things for sure.
What about for
Yeah,
you?
I don't know. That's a pretty common answer. When I went into a town, it was always, yeah, burger or pizza, or like I loved American barbecue. So whenever there was a barbecue joint around, go in there and just like order everything off the menu. But we all just needed calories so badly. So anything that was super carby and fatty and oily, I think your body just naturally craves because it knows that's the most calorie dense. We ate like PCT
Yeah.
hikers eat like pigs in town. We eat a lot of food. It's crazy, but you just can't keep up with the calories you're burning. But Garron, you definitely were one of my favorite trail angels because whenever we'd see you, we'd get like a nice hot coffee, and there was one point in northern Washington where you made us all like mac and cheese towards the end of the hike and stuff like that. You were a king. Plus the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi was heavenly. Um, I know people are going to want to hear about your trail name, Dedra. You know that I am not a big trail name person, but you got to tell the story. What were you called, and how did you get that name? And did you have a trail name, Garron, even though you went on the trail? Did you get bestowed one?
Kinda.
Kinda. I don't know if it was official. Her trail family only were some who called me it, and it was still infrequent, but they just called me the dog daddy because I had a van full of dogs traveling with us. I don't know if we mentioned, but I had 3 dogs with me throughout this trip too. So every time we
Yeah,
came into
yeah,
town, I was the guy with dogs.
Well,
yeah.
it's kind of funny because I think Emma near the end was saying clutch for Garen could be a trail.
Clutch. Yeah,
Uh,
that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Which kind of makes sense because cars have clutches too. It was a great name.
Hey, yeah, there you go. It works both ways.
Next one.
we're on to something. For me, so I had 2 trail names along the journey. The first one was A List, and I think it was just pretty surface level. It was just like people knew I was vlogging along the trail, and they were just like talking originally about how I was like a movie star and kind of joking, and then A List kind of came from that. And I had that for maybe like a month,
Yeah.
and then when I started hanging out with my tramley more, and they kind of were, picking up on who I was as an individual and kind of our dynamic and things like that, Forrest Gump eventually came. And it was because whenever we would get close into towns, I would leave the trail family and I would basically sprint to get out to Garron to see the dogs and get food. And
Just
so
started running.
it kind of started becoming I would just run and I would leave them, and yeah, so they kind of became a running joke, like run Forrest run, and so that's how Forrest Gump came.
And mine should have been Jenny then, It would have made more sense.
Yeah, that would have worked. It's funny, DJ, because I think you were the only person to call me by the trail name that my trail family bestowed upon me, even though I sort of rejected it. Whenever I'd see you, be like, "Hey, Shakira's here."
Yeah.
I'm like, Dedra. No, it's Cam. Remember? So I think you're one of the few that even knew that name existed, and definitely tried to make it happen.
Yeah.
You have to thank Chris for the insider.
Yeah, Chris gave you the heads up in like Ashland or something like that, and then next time I saw you, just screamed it out. I
Yeah.
was like, "What? Where'd you hear that?"
That's great.
Yeah, I'm interested to know what's next for you guys. So you guys are based on Vancouver Island, right, in Canada? I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but yeah, what's next? Do you have any big adventures coming up? Are you hitting the road again in the van? Are you working back in your home, your actual home, your house, or what's happening?
Yeah, so after the trail, we basically came back to the island, and we are no longer living full time in the van right now. We actually found a rental to stay in for 6 months, kind of through the winter time. We decided to go that route only because we had to be back in Canada, and we didn't want to, be in the van when it was snowing and raining the whole entire time. It would be a little bit more difficult with the dogs. So we decided to go the rental route, which is currently what we're sitting in right now. We went with a 6 month lease because that's all we have to be in Canada for 6 months. And then once that is up, we obviously have plans to get back to traveling, which some of those plans are potentially another through hike like the Camino, which we've been kind of chatting about, Cam, you, Dan, and I,
Yeah,
and Emma, potentially getting, your wife to come and Garron to come, and having all six of us go do that, which I think would be a really fun
yeah.
time. And then I want to run an ultra, so I want to do a 100K run. I'm debating if I should do a 50K or 100K, but as you know, someone who's a big dreamer and likes to do big things,
Go
I
big, go
probably will
big.
go with the 100K. Go big. And then yeah, I just want to take some small backpacking trips with my dogs and get them out a little bit more and get them into the backpacking with us, and potentially do a group trip actually with some of my followers who are following me. They're interested in doing a group trip, so I'm talking with a company right now who is wanting to set that up with me. So I might be doing something like that next year as well. So those are some things that I'm thinking about in the near future.
Exciting, super exciting. I got to ask what it's like traveling with dogs, because you're talking about doing backpacking trips with dogs. Obviously, you guys have done van life with dogs, not just like a dog, three dogs. Like that doesn't exist in Australia, because dogs just they can't come into national parks for one, and most of our wilderness is national parks, and you often can't
Mhm.
camp with dogs. It's just not really viable. You definitely can't go hiking with your dogs pretty much anywhere, and you almost certainly couldn't have a good time traveling in a van with a dog. So, what's that been like for you guys? Do you miss out on much because you have dogs, and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean,
Pros and
van
cons.
lifing with dogs is tight. It adds a big element of no space in the van itself. That's one thing I'll say. It is a bit different. It was a shock for us because in Canada, dogs are allowed in all national parks, and you can hike with them on trail as well, given that they're leashed. When we went to the United States, we found out that in their national parks, that's not the case. Like dogs aren't allowed in any of them. So it really did impact a lot of how we traveled. There's a lot of national parks we ended up missing or not going to for that reason. Like Yosemite, I never got to go in there just strictly because I have dogs. And, in our van, we didn't have AC. So, weather was a big factor. They become your whole life because you can't leave them for too long. You have to worry about people breaking in if they're there. You have to worry about heat, all that stuff. So you really do revolve your entire life around them, especially when you're in a van. Whereas, like when you're in a house, you can just leave them at home, go do your thing for the day, come back, and you might have family or friends who come check in on them. That's not available when you're traveling. So, life really does revolve around them. But at the same time, I tell everybody that I think it also elevated it because they force you to get outside. A dog in a van, people worry about, oh, there's no space. And I'm like, that's true when they're resting, but we got out and walked 2 to 3 times a day. like we would do 2 short ones and then 1 long one for the most part. And we spent most of our time in search of dog parks. So we got to see every dog park in every city in the United States, it feels like. And so yeah, it's just, and that part alone gets you to see different parts of the city because you're going to weird corners that you would never have a reason to go there. But there's a dog park on a little green area in the middle of Austin, Texas. And you're like, all right, we're going there today. So it hindered it in some ways, and other ways I think really enhanced it.
Yeah, that's super cool. I've always wanted to backpack with my dog, but it's not possible here. So I'm gonna have to maybe fly my dog to Canada and then go backpacking and visiting national parks. Might be the only the only solution. But no, it sounds like you guys have got some exciting stuff coming up, which is really cool. Are you guys still coming to Australia? Wasn't that on the cards as well?
Oh yeah, it's 50-50 right now. Yeah, we just had some expenses, some vet bills, things like that kind of come up. So we are just seeing essentially like what it looks like financially just before. But I would love to, honestly, if we can make it happen, that would be great. It'd be cool to see you and Dan and set something up there and meet your wife. Yeah, I would love to meet your dog too. But I know like where we're going, it's so far from where you live. So you would have to. I don't know. You were thinking about. Yeah, you were thinking about maybe flying over and meeting us, which would be super nice of you.
I'll make that happen.
Yeah, so it's kind of yeah, it's like 50-50 right now. So we will see. I would love to come, but
at some point our wallets do run out. We're not trust fund babies yet.
Yeah, unfortunately, these things cost things. And I mean, Vancouver Island to Brisbane, I think where you guys were going, it's one of the longest flights on planet Earth. Like, it's a long transit, so not cheap, not easy to get away for that kind of trip. But hey, we'll hopefully meet up again somewhere around the globe very soon. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on, guys. It's been really, really cool to catch up. And thanks for sharing some of your PCT experience, which I think is quite a unique one compared to a lot of solo hikers on the trail. Yeah, where can people find you, and where can they follow your adventures?
Yeah, so you can follow me on all platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Those are kind of my 3 main platforms. Instagram is route_to happiness, and then TikTok and YouTube are the route to happiness, ROUTE. So you can find me on all those platforms, and thanks for having us, Cam.
Appreciate it.
Of course, guys. Thank you so much. We will chat very soon. For those listening, if you did enjoy this podcast, please make sure to follow, make sure to rate, and leave a comment below wherever you're listening to the show. It is much appreciated. And I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
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 See you guys.